Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Hope everybody's had a happy and safe holiday season so far. Today I want to talk about the news that was released a week or so ago at the time that I'm recording this video. And that is that Paramount Pictures has announced a 2021 release date for a brand new Dungeons & Dragons movie. And I wanted to talk about, the D&D movies for quite some time, and one of the things I kind of want to do is see if I can find a way to fix the original without, completely changing the story and everything. Which may be something to do for a video down the road here, depending. But the big news is, again, that, Paramount is looking to actually release a Dungeons & Dragons movie, which the D&D franchise has not had the best record when it comes to movies, basically. The first movie that came out, I think it was in 2000 or 2001, was completely and utterly disastrous, and that'll be the subject of a whole other video. But basically, it was poorly received, and it did very little to actually represent the Dungeons & Dragons game. There were two other live-action movies that have come out since then. I only have one of the three live-action movies in my collection, and that is Wrath of the Dragon God. And Wrath of the Dragon God was actually pretty good. And if this movie could, if this could have been the one to come out in theaters, then I think the franchise overall would be a lot stronger for it. If it had the budget and the production values of a full-blown cinematic movie, one shown in theaters, then this would have been an amazing movie. As it was made for the Sci-Fi Channel, and it actually still ended up being pretty decent. Now, the effects are pretty hit or miss, but overall, it was a really good movie. Not the greatest movie, but far, far superior to the first Dungeons & Dragons movie, and in my opinion, still better than The Book of Vile Darkness, which was the third movie to be released. One of the great things about this in particular is that the the party members actually felt like a genuine party. They, interact with each other in ways that, seem to make sense for all of the characters involved. The classes actually do what the classes are supposed to do. You see the wizard cast spells that you can easily identify, unlike in the first movie where you really weren't sure of any of the spells being cast with the exception of probably Dimension Door and maybe Magic Missile, but Magic Missile doesn't, trap you in a magical barrier that keeps you unable to get back up to your feet for a few seconds. So anyway, I don't want to get too much into that right now, but this movie actually did a really great job of capturing the feel of Dungeons & Dragons. So I've had people ask me what my thoughts are on, the idea of a new D&D movie, and I'm going to be honest, my current thoughts and feelings on it right now is trepidation, I guess. I'm not sure how to feel at this point. Reading the article, and I'll post a link to the article in the comment section below where they made the announcement, there are a few things that kind of send up red flags for me. One of the things that they said is that they want to have it feel, or have the same kind of lighthearted sense that Guardians of the Galaxy has. And Guardians of the Galaxy is great. They're actually the only Marvel movies I really genuinely enjoy anymore. And I haven't seen Thor Ragnarok. I heard that was actually pretty good as well. But I don't think that having this lighthearted approach and trying to emulate the sense or the feel of the characters from Guardians of the Galaxy is the best direction to take with the Dungeons & Dragons movie. One of the things that really ruined the first one was the fact that they were trying to have this comedic edge to it, and it just really fell flat, and it's something that I really don't want to see. I want to see them actually make a serious Dungeons & Dragons movie. I don't want this to be a Guardians of the Galaxy knockoff. The basic premise as well doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence in me either. However, I will say that the premise that was given on this article isn't necessarily the one that Paramount is going to go with. I know that there's a celebrity, Joe, and I can't remember his last name, starts with D. He was in the Stream of Annihilation way back when they announced all the Tomb of Annihilation stuff, and he played Randy. He played Randy the Savage, who was a macho man kind of character. He was a barbarian, but he was actually, and I hate joke characters, and that's another video subject for another day, but he did it well. It wasn't painful. When he did the voice, it was funny. You know, the way that he did things was great. And from my understanding, he is genuinely a gigantic fan of Dungeons and Dragons, and he wants to do the screenplay for the movie. And I'm hoping that he gets the opportunity to, because I think he's going to go in a different direction from what this synopsis was. But the synopsis was that they were looking to have a Vin Diesel type lead hero, and it focuses on this warrior and his band of mystical allies. And I hate that they use that term. And the examples they give is a half-dragon and a gnome as these mystical allies, as they seek some sort of ancient MacGuffin artifact. So again, that makes me a little nervous. I just... You know, I suspect that if they do the half-dragon, they're probably not going to have this being like the highest budget movie possible. So I'm a bit concerned that if they do have a half-dragon, that it's just going to look awful. And just, again, calling them a band of mystical allies just really doesn't... It sounds like it was written by someone who doesn't understand what Dungeons & Dragons actually is, and just wanted to throw some words that, you know, they thought would encourage people to want to watch the movie. So that's the premise that, you know, they kind of give on this article. But I want to talk a little bit about what I actually would rather see when it comes to the D&D movie, and things that I think they need to do in order to actually make it successful. So the first thing that I think that they need to do is not worry so much about copying the feeling of Guardians of the Galaxy. Again, having lighthearted, jokey characters is fine, and yes, it can capture the feel of what happens at the table. But I don't think it's the best direction for this franchise. There's been enough, issues with that in the past, especially with the very first movie with Marlon Wayans and Jeremy Irons totally hamming it up on screen. But again, I can't blame them considering how that movie ended up turning out. I think what they need to do is have a mainly serious tone to the movie with a sprinkling of comedic moments or lines, something that can kind of just contrast with the rest of the movie. So I'd like to see it be more serious, because I think that the Dungeons & Dragons brand deserves to have a serious tone to it. The other thing that I would like to see is it to have a decent runtime. The fact of the matter is that Dungeons & Dragons is a game that's meant to be played over the course of a long period of time. Sometimes it can be the campaign can be wrapped up in months. Sometimes it can take years. So having a 90-minute runtime for their movies isn't really going to give them enough time to actually flesh out the characters or do anything really beyond just a couple of set-piece fights, and that's it. So I'd like to see it have a more serious runtime, similar to maybe what the Lord of the Rings movies had. I'd like to see them have a budget similar to Lord of the Rings, but that's probably not going to happen, so it's going to be what it's going to be. But again, I'd like to see a more serious tone with a longer runtime to actually establish the characters and just give us some moments that we can see them interacting, get some feel of actual dungeon exploration and things like that, and combats and things along those lines. That's kind of what I'd like to see. The other thing that I want to see is the rules represented accurately. So again, with the first Dungeons and Dragons movie, there were a lot of very questionable things that happened in it. And without spoiling too much, when I actually do a video on the first D&D movie alone, there were a lot of creatures in the first D&D movie that just didn't exist. Like in the Thieves Guild, they had that purple creature with the eye in its forehead that I don't know what that is, and I've got a ton of monster books, so maybe it's something super obscure, but I've just never seen it. You also had another creature that had just a green face and fish teeth, but wasn't a fish, it was just a humanoid. It just looked bad. The first movie also had beholders acting as guard dogs, and that's just wrong on so many levels. So I want to see the rules represented accurately. I want to see the monsters portrayed as they should be, and I want to see actual Dungeons & Dragons monsters being represented on screen. I don't want them to make stuff up. If you're going to have a beholder, have it be as dangerous as an actual beholder. Have it be smart. Don't have it running down or flying down a hallway looking for intruders with all of its eyes essentially pointed in the same direction, and none of them pointed backwards. It was just bad. It was awful, and I hated it. So anyway, have that. Have the characters, the party members, use their abilities that they would have in the game. Have a rogue actually deliver a powerful sneak attack. You know, have them maybe show earlier on that in a toe-to-toe fight, they're not the greatest, but when they get the ability to work in concert with, like, a fighter, for example, they can deal some serious damage. You know, have that represented. Have the spells easily identifiable. Simple thing is to have your wizard cast Burning Hands by actually touching their thumbs together and spreading their fingers out, which is how Burning Hands is supposed to be done. One of the things that they had in the second movie is, I think, the wizard cast Burning Hands, but it just kind of was this like line of flame that came out of her staff. So I didn't like that quite as much. Now that may have been a different thing altogether, but again, you should just have everything be really instantly recognizable because you want this movie to appeal to fans of the actual role-playing game. And seeing Burning Hands done like this would be a huge way of letting us know that you're actually taking the presentation of the rules seriously. Have like Magic Missile be, again, instantly identifiable and not have it have extra abilities like in the first movie where it knocked people down and rendered them paralyzed for a few moments. That just didn't exist. So have stuff like that, you know. Show the Barbarian going into a rage if you're going to have a Barbarian, which they did do in Wrath of the Dragon God quite well. So that's another thing that, again, I would like to see. The last thing that I want to see in the movie is I want to see them reference things from Dungeons & Dragons lore. One of the really cool things about Wrath of the Dragon God is that it dropped names from various other previously established Dungeons & Dragons adventures. They mentioned the Ghost Tower of Inverness. They mentioned the Shrine of the Kuo-toa. They mentioned the Barrier Peaks. The Barbarian character's brother ended up going on this expedition to the Barrier Peaks and went insane after what he found there. So if you don't know Dungeons & Dragons and you've never played or you're not familiar with a lot of the classic adventures, that may have sailed over your head. But for those of us who knew about Expedition to the Barrier Peaks and things like the Froghemoth and the sheep and wolf's clothing, or the wolf in sheep's clothing, sorry, and just all these really crazy, you know, sci-fi-esque creatures, we know why, you know, the Barbarian's brother went insane. So just references and things like that, I think, need to happen. Lastly, and I think I said lastly with the last thing, but truly lastly, what story or should they tell with the movie? And this is going to be sort of a difficult one, and I think the best thing to do, honestly, would be to adapt one of the novels. Instead of trying to come up with their own unique story, which has not done them particularly well in the past, with, you know, the one exception that kind of stands out. I know that the Joe, and I really sorry, I want to think it's like DiMaggio or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm just really bad with names. I saw it just before I sat down to do this recording too, but anyway, from what I understand, he wanted to do a live-action adaptation of the Dragonlance Chronicles, and I think that would be cool. Personally, I'd like to see that. The animated movie was okay, but it had a very 1980s Saturday morning cartoon feel to it. So I'd like to see a live-action adaptation that's a little grittier, a little more riskier with its rating. Like, this had a PG-13 but didn't do much to earn it. So I'd like to see sort of a more kind of grittier, realistic look at it, you know, not so 80s cartoon, but to do something like that. Now, I've heard rumors that they were looking to adapt the Drizzt novels into some movies, and I don't think that's going to happen with this. Now, there's, of course, always going to be a lot of backlash because there's a percentage of the population that doesn't like the Drizzt character. I love the character. I love the novels. I've read them all at this point, and I'm kind of sad to see that they've stopped, at least for the time being. But I don't think they're going to end up doing that for this live-action movie. I think my understanding is that if they ever did tackle the Dark Elf trilogy and like the Legend of Drizzt stuff, it would be in the form of like animated movies. But I'd like to see them probably adapt one of the books. I think that would probably be the safest route to take. And then that way you can open yourself up for, you know, sequels and stuff like that. Now, if they come up with their own unique story, that's going to be fine as well. But again, they need to kind of throw in those nods to D&D's past. Like maybe mention, in passing something like, Acererak in the Tomb of Horrors, or, like what they did there was just kind of drop names. The Shrine of the Kuo-toa, the Ghost Tower of Inverness. So I think that's what they need to do. As it stands right now, if they end up making this Guardians of the Galaxy-esque movie with the Vin Diesel type warrior and his half-dragon and gnome mystical allies, I don't know how much I'm going to want to see that. I don't really have faith in the movie studios to present a unique new story for the Dungeons & Dragons brand and do it well and treat it as seriously as the property should be treated. So again, I hope that they actually just go ahead and adapt one of the novels. I did also hear someone, or not hear, but I read somebody comment that they would like to see a live-action follow-up to the Dungeons & Dragons animated series, because the series never got to properly end. The show was just canceled out of the blue, and back in these days, back in the 80s, if you were canceled, that was it. You didn't really get the chance to go out sort of on your own terms. So when it was canceled, that was it. It was done. The final episode was never actually created, but they did for this DVD set. They did do a kind of like a radio broadcast style play for it, like a radio play, to get the last episode out there. So I've heard some people say that they wanted to see the Dungeons & Dragons animated series get its concluding chapter in the movies, and as cool as that might be, I don't see it happening just because it's only going to cater to fans of the Dungeons & Dragons animated series, and it's not necessarily going to be something that people who've never watched the cartoons are going to be able to wrap their head around. And I love the cartoon, but honestly, it isn't something that holds up super well. The first few episodes were actually incredibly painful to watch. Later stuff actually starts getting really good, and you can see that they were really building an awesome storyline that just never got to finish. But anyway, so yeah, as interesting as that might be, that's probably never going to happen. So anyway, those are sort of my thoughts and my concerns about the announcement of the new Dungeons & Dragons movie. The one last thing I'll say on it is the fact that they have a release date. I can't remember the specific. They actually have the month and day that they want to release this movie on. That's another thing that concerns me, because it doesn't sound like they actually have the story nailed down yet, so it's not like they actually have a script prepared. And I'm hoping that they're not completely set in stone with this release date in the event that they don't get a good script, because one of the things that can happen if a studio sets out to make a release date before they actually want to make a good movie is you can run into issues, and that's really what happened with the movie Alien 3. Now, personally, Alien 3 is actually my favorite of the bunch just because of how different it ended up being. But that's not going to work out for everybody, and it's not something that a lot of people really share that opinion of. So I'm hoping that if they, 2021 is still quite a ways away, so we're still looking at about, a little over 3 years, 3.5 years, I think, at this point. So that does give them time, but I'm hoping that if they can't get the script that they want, that they will move their release date rather than try to stick to it. Because issues with that kind of led to us getting the Dungeons & Dragons movie that we got back in 2000, 2001, which was based off of a rejected script that the studios already didn't want, or the director already didn't want to use because of how bad it was. But they were coming on to crunch time, and they had to get the movie out because of the release date, so they ended up using a already rejected version of the script. At least that's based off of information that I read about it. So anyway, what do you guys think of the announcement of the new Dungeons & Dragons movie? Are you looking forward to it? Are you cautiously optimistic, or is it something that you're going to basically pass on unless you hear nothing but great things about, and you're not going to take the chance to go see it in theaters? So let me know what you guys think. What would you want to see for the story? Do you want to see the Dragonlance books adapted to the big screen? Do you want to see a brand new story? Are you okay with a more lighthearted approach, or do you want to see something a little more serious? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.